So I'm dreaming of this place. It's Leopold's Book Bar Cafe. It's the dreamiest bookstore, cafe, and cocktail bar combo you'll ever find. And it's right here at 1301 Regent Street. They've got the latest books from around the world, wines to sip or take home, and live jazz, plus open hours until midnight most nights of the week. You can grab a drink or dessert and just kick back at Leopold's.
Today on CityCast Madison. It's Thursday, so of course we're dishing on Madison's food scene. It's frosty out, and if you're like me, this time of year is rough because the delicious local food has gone away. No more Bountiful Garden. Bye-bye fresh tomatoes. But I know a guy who says, not so fast. You can eat locally year-round, even here in snowy Wisconsin. His name's Sam Thayer, and he's written the book on foraging wild food here. Several books, actually. And he's speaking in Madison this weekend, so I had to ask him what he's eating. It's Thursday, November 2nd. I'm Molly Stentz, and here's what Madison's talking about. Sam, you're best known for your field guides to foraging in Wisconsin, but it's November and it's frosty. What is there to forage this time of year?
So, a lot of people think of foraging as a very seasonal activity in that you can only do it certain times of the year. And I think of it as something that you can do all year, but what's seasonal about it is the things that I'm doing. When I say foraging, I'm including the harvest and the preparing and eating wild food. So in the wintertime, I'm still cracking nuts and grinding grains and cooking with wild things that I have stored throughout the year. And there's a lot of processing to do for some of these things, like, say, I will pick a whole bunch of hazelnuts in mostly late August, early September, and then I will have to dry them, get the husks off, and then I crack them, separate them, and then periodically throughout the year make hazelnut milk. And that's more of a winter activity than a summer activity.
Yeah. Wait, do you have a machine that does that? Because that's a lot of work.
So, well, food preparation from scratch, no matter what it is a lot of work. But I harvest the hazelnuts by hand, and then I dry them. And then I actually will put them into a wooden barrel and dance on them, stomp on them with my feet, just like I do with wild rice and a number of other things to process. Which is a really effective way to get the dried husks off, and then you just winnow it off. And many years ago, when I first ate wild hazelnuts, I thought these are really good, but they're a piddly waste of time. It takes forever just to get a few, but I'll eat them every now and then as a snack. But then somebody got me about 20 years ago this Dave-built nut cracker that's designed for hazelnuts, and I can crack a 5-gallon bucket of hazelnuts in 12 minutes.
Wow.
And that's very much changed what hazelnuts have been to me. So I can crack them only maybe twice a year, and just, 15, 20 minutes of cracking each time, and then have all the hazelnuts I could eat through the course of a year.
Yeah. Do you also collect walnuts? Because there are so many walnut trees around Wisconsin, but they are such a chore. Do you have a trick for walnuts?
I do collect black walnuts, not in huge quantities. They're not as common here in northern Wisconsin, but we have a couple on our property. And I don't really have a trick. It's a fair amount of work, but it doesn't feel more laborious than a lot of the things that I do. So I actually will take the hulls off right under the tree. I stomp on them when the hulls are at the right softness. Just a light stomp, and then I just twist it, each nut as I pick it up, and pull the nut out of the husk. And then after I get the nuts like that, then I rinse them off. And some people use like a power washer or something, but
yeah,
it's too much work and it's not much benefit. I rinse them once, and then I dry them, and then they're pretty clean. And then I just crack them as I need them through the winter. But this time of year, late fall, is probably when I harvest the greatest amount of the calories that I harvest through the year. So on Sunday, I collected 67.5 gallons of hickory nuts under one tree. And this is on the property of somebody that I know. And he doesn't want lots of squirrels in the yard. So he likes me to pick up all the hickory nuts, and I like to pick up all the hickory nuts. So I'm going to press these for oil, and I'll get about 5 gallons of oil from what I picked in 4 hours. So I have a lot of fun being a squirrel for half a day. And then I get literally more oil than our family could use in a year. We'll use about 3.5 gallons in a year. And then I've got really good locally sourced organic cooking oil and fresh oil for everything I want to cook year round.
So other than nuts, what are some of the other things that you're actively collecting or foraging this time of year?
Lamb's quarter seeds. We'll put up a few pounds of those through the winter. And I actually take the hulls off by dancing them in a barrel and winnowing, just like I do with wild rice and like I do with the hazelnuts.
Wait, what do you do with the lamb's quarter seeds?
You use it just like quinoa.
Oh.
And quinoa is a species, the same genus as lamb's quarters. And lamb's quarter seeds taste almost identical to quinoa.
So you're boiling it and making like a pilaf.
Yeah. Yep. We're using it like a hot cereal, or sometimes grinding it in a dry blender to mix it with flour and various things we might bake. There's a lot of stuff. Anything you could do with quinoa, you could do with the lamb's quarter seed.
Yeah, and they're abundant. Okay.
When you're talking like nuts or starchy grain type products, all of these things take sort of like some capital and some skills before they're useful to you. So I always think the best way to introduce people to foraging is through berries, because people can just pick them and stick them right in their mouth, or greens, because wild greens have every advantage over grocery store greens. There's more variety, there's better flavor, there's better quality. And most of the year, I can go get wild greens within walking distance of my house much more quickly than I could get store-bought greens, which I would have to drive 20 miles to the store to get lower quality greens and pay money for them. And greens are fairly expensive in terms of, well, you know, a lot of things. Like if you imagine gathering a wild root vegetable and then you compare that to the price of potatoes, you might think, well, was this really worth it? But greens are so easy to gather.
And so perishable.
Right. So I'd rather just go get them and use them that same day. So even now in this freezing cold weather, we're getting a good flush of greens of sochan or cutleaf coneflower, waterleaf, dandelion. And, you know, I like to just take these things this time of year and kind of chop them up, mix them, fry them mix it with wild rice or other vegetables. And it's just a really nice way to add some variety to the diet. So we don't think of fall as a good time for greens, but a lot of our native woodland plants will send out a new flush of greens in the fall. And then you get some plants like wintercress is called wintercress for a reason. That's a mustard where the greens taste best in the winter when, you know, freezing seems to make the greens taste a lot better, and they're very frost proof.
Like a little sweeter. It brings out the sweetness.
Yeah. And it also, there's some bitterness that's there in the summer that's not there in the winter. So this is like the optimum time to collect wintercress until it's covered by snow and you can't find it. And like right now, cranberries. Not many people pick wild cranberries, but there's a lot of them. And there's something you can pick in big quantity. And then, you know, we'll make cranberry sauce, or I haven't picked cranberries yet, so I hope the snow melts.
The high bush varieties?
They're easy to get to, but I'm thinking of the regular bog cranberries. So
okay.
High bush cranberries are problematic because there's a native species that is good to eat. There's a European species that is very, very bitter. And especially in southern Wisconsin, you see about 90 to 98% the European high bush cranberry planted. The actual native high bush cranberry is very hard to find in southern Wisconsin. So a lot of people believe that fruit tastes worse than it actually does. I don't make cranberry sauce from high bush cranberries. I make cranberry juice.
And so a lot of the plants that you were talking about that you mentioned in your books are classified as weeds, right? I mean, is there a plant that you wish for the landscape that more people in Wisconsin would eat?
Well, you know, there is a lot of people kind of promoting the idea of eating invasive plants. And it's a little bit problematic in that our most invasive plants tend to not be very good edibles, with the exception of garlic mustard. But I can't eat enough garlic mustard to really put a dent in the local population. But a lot of our
True.
worst invasive plants are not really edibles, like buckthorns. Autumn olive, though, is an invasive shrub, which is one of my favorite fruits. Again, you can't really put a dent in it by harvesting it.
Wait, what are you doing with those?
They make the best fruit leather. I don't make jam very often, but they make really good jam. They make really good pie.
Wow.
I just love to just stuff my face with autumn olives. It's one of my favorite fruits in the world.
And so you're not eating them raw.
I love to eat them raw.
Yeah?
I'll eat a quart at a time. I'll eat until I just like when I go berry picking and it's something that's just perfect, but blueberries, service berries, autumn olives, I just eat until I can't stand it anymore. It's like you get to be like a kid in a candy store, except you don't have to feel bad about it.
Well, and I imagine that there's also a lot of roots this time of year. I've seen that you will talk about eating like burdock roots and thistle roots. Are those something that you actively go out and collect?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So burdock roots are good, but they're so large, it's hard to get to the tender part because the top part of the root tends to be tougher, and then it gets more tender as you get towards the bottom. And a root that's 30 inches long, it's hard to get anything that's below like 15 inches underground. But if you can find burdock in very soft soil and get those roots out, they're excellent. However, all thistles, which are really closely related to burdocks, also have edible roots. And not to get too technical here, but we have a bunch of species of thistle, and we have two of them that are really good root vegetables, good enough that I'm experimenting with growing them.
What? No. Sam, no.
Oh, yes. So we have the native pasture or prairie thistle, that's Cirsium discolor, and then the woodland thistle or tall thistle, Cirsium altissimum, especially that last one. These are so good. I mean, the roots are just incredible. And I think they would be a great crop to grow interspersed with another native crop like pawpaw or native mulberry or nut trees. And they were widely eaten by Native Americans, and just delicious root vegetable.
Wow.
And you can eat the thistle stalks. So in early summer, you get thistle stalks, and then in the fall and through the winter, as long as the ground's not frozen, you can get the roots.
God, I feel like there's so many of them. There's no need to cultivate those suckers.
You're talking thistles in general.
Yeah.
I'm talking about specific kinds of thistles. So in the Madison area, you're seeing lots of bull thistle, primarily, a little bit of nodding thistle and plumeless thistle. All those are non-native weedy thistles.
Right.
But actually, the attitude that you're showing there is kind of actually problematic. I was visiting a nature center, I'm not going to name it, that has a restored tall grass prairie, and they have a problem that they can't get the native thistles in there because people that work at the nature center keep spraying them with herbicide.
Oh.
So they're eliminating all their native thistles because the attitude that thistles are bad is really hard for people to get rid of. But we do have some not only delicious, but really beautiful native thistles that are common throughout Wisconsin.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I wanted to ask you, I've always been curious about ginseng, and I know that it's, pretty highly regulated and you have to have a license and whatnot. Is that something that you forage for, wild ginseng?
No, never.
How come?
Wild ginseng is so rare. I would argue that it's absurd that it's legal to harvest. So if you do find wild ginseng, quote, wild ginseng out in the woods in Wisconsin, most of the time it's planted by somebody there. You could give me a state endangered species, many of them, and I could go out and find them for you, no problem. Ginseng, which has no such listing, is going to be really hard for me to find actual wild ginseng. I think I know 3 locations in the state that have it, and I've put on many thousands of miles on foot off trail in the state. So it's extremely localized. There's virtually none in the Wausau area, and it's just too valuable. I mean, when something's worth $2,000 or $3,000 a pound, it doesn't stay out in the woods.
Yeah.
I don't care what they do to regulate it. There are people where it persists is landowners that protect their property, and they may sustainably pick the ginseng on their own property, and they protect it from the unscrupulous commercial harvesters that are wandering around trespassing. But from public lands with public access, you will almost never see wild ginseng anymore.
Yeah. So what are your personal ethics when it comes to foraging?
Well, that is really related to each individual plant, and also, I guess, tailored to each individual location. But the overall idea is that you want to be foraging in such a way that you are not harming the populations of any of the things that you're foraging. But once people start foraging, they tend to take it beyond that to where they think of themselves as caretakers of the plants that they're foraging. You do occasionally get people, mostly that are new to foraging, that don't understand how easy it could be to cause a decline of a certain plant and may overharvest it. But things like nuts and berries, for example, are, I mean, you're not going to hurt an apple tree or apple population by harvesting the apples. I'm just using that as an example.
Sure.
Whether it's wild plums, crab apples, blueberries, service berries, mulberries, whatever it is, they produce thousands of times more seed than they need to actually, reproduce themselves. When you're collecting root vegetables, where the plant has a single edible part and the plant is killed to get that part. So we go back to the native thistles we're talking about. You dig up a native thistle and eat the root. You have to kill the plant to do that. So then your stewardship becomes way more important in that situation.
Are you foraging in public lands, natural areas, places, people's land that you know personally?
All of those. So, for instance, in Wisconsin state parks, you can collect nuts, berries, mushrooms for personal consumption. And I do that when I'm in the state parks, in the state forests, and the county lands around me, same rules. As far as digging up root vegetables, I'm doing that mostly on private land, a lot on my land. I also have neighbors, people that I know who are fine with that. So it really depends. When you're in an urban area, a lot of times there's weedy plants, and nobody cares if you pick chickweed from the lawn in a park. But your bigger worry is whose dog might have peed here or who might have sprayed this.
Herbicide, right? That's what I would think.
Herbicide is the biggest worry for foraging, in my opinion now. And a lot of people don't realize how much the use of herbicide has just exploded in the last 25 years.
Yeah. So for people who want to learn more, people who are wanting to get started, you're giving a talk at Olbrich this weekend at the Madison Herb Fair. Where do you recommend people start?
Well, I recommend that people start with one plant. So if you think about learning foraging, it can sound intimidating. It's like learning Japanese, learning German, but you can use one plant once you know that one plant. So learn one at a time, and you don't need to know any additional plants to use the one you already know. And I recommend starting with something that is familiar to you. If there's a plant that's in your neighborhood, try to identify it. And if you identify a familiar plant that you see a lot in your neighborhood, the chances are better than 50-50 that it has an edible part. And the worst thing that happens is you wasted your time learning a plant that's not edible, which isn't a waste of time.
Yeah. What about, though, plants that are poisonous?
You don't eat those. Yeah.
You only do it once, right?
Well, the interesting thing is that the fear of eating a poisonous plant tends to be a really prevalent fear among non-foragers and beginning foragers. Once people start foraging, they realize that there's nothing random about it. You only intentionally put things in your mouth, and you have a clear grasp on when you do or don't know what something is. So you've probably never eaten an apple and wondered if it wasn't an apple. And that's exactly how you should feel about every wild thing you ever eat. If you're wondering what the thing is, then you have no business eating it. You eat something only after you're at the point where you are thoroughly and absolutely confident about what it is. And that's never the first time you encounter it. So, people might imagine that foraging is going out and finding new unfamiliar things and trying them out. Nope, that's no part of foraging. That's never a part of foraging. You only try things once they are completely and absolutely familiar to you.
Sam Thayer, thank you for joining us today. We will link to your workshop at the Madison Herb Fair at Olbrich Botanical Gardens.
Well, thank you so much. It was an honor to be on talking to you.
That was Sam Thayer, author of The Forager's Harvest and a number of books about edible native plants in Wisconsin. He's speaking at the Madison Herb Fair at Olbrich Botanical Gardens this Saturday, November 4th. We've got a link with all the details in our show notes. And here's what else Madison's talking about. School. Starting next Monday, some Madison schools will have slightly different start and end times. That's because many school buses have been late getting kids to school on time. The school bus company says they're having trouble finding enough drivers. So Madison's school officials are changing the time school starts and ends to deal with the problem. And the state's largest power company is phasing out coal sooner than we expected. We Energies says they're planning to stop burning coal by 2032, about 8 years away. That's according to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, who had a reporter sit in on the We Energies earnings call this week. We Energies plans to shut down the oldest part of the coal-burning power plant at Oak Creek in Milwaukee next year and switch it over to natural gas. The company originally said that was supposed to happen this year, but they got delayed. They're also building solar and wind farms across the state. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm Molly Stentz. If you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with someone you think would like to eat thistle roots? Let me know how that goes. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Ciao!